And we turn now to our political panel. Mally Smith, Democratic strategist and former political director for the Harris campaign, North Carolina, and Brendan Steinhauser, Republican strategist and partner at Steinhauser Strategies. Gentlemen, great to have you both. Brendan, I'd like to start with you and the very latest on this big, beautiful bill. You heard Libby's report there. We have two Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine, Josh Hawley of Missouri now, two key holdouts, we should note, saying now they'll vote to advance the Senate's version of this bill, citing some changes made to the text yesterday. Collins, though, saying she'd still like to see some additional changes. But you now have three senators, Rand Paul, Ron Johnson, Tom Tillis, saying they're a no. Senate Republicans can only afford three no's. What are you reading into these developments? Do you think this bill will make it to the president's desk by Independence Day?
Yeah, it's a good question. And this is kind of, it's not that rare in Washington, but it is somewhat rare to have these bills be debated and negotiated at the final days and final hours, even in these negotiations. A lot of times, you know what the outcome is. And with this one, we really don't. And it's been interesting to watch because it's such a big bill. You have all these constituencies that have an interest in it passing or changing before it passes. And so for folks like Senator Johnson and Paul, they're looking at not only the spending side of the bill, but Senator Paul and others are looking at things like this AI moratorium against states, preventing them from regulating on AI for 10 years. That's been a big holdup for a lot of Republicans in the Senate. And so the problem with these big bills is that there's so many interests at stake that it gets very difficult to corral the votes. But look, the president is negotiating. He's lobbying his Republican senators and trying to get this over the finish line. And so I think he's probably going to do it. But I would expect potentially to see some more changes through this process before it gets to his desk.
And you're even seeing some lawmakers making the same arguments you outlined. Mally, before this news, the Senate parliamentarian ruled against Medicaid provisions in this bill, namely some provisions that would have helped Republicans rein in some spending in some pretty major ways. So the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, he can overrule the Senate parliamentarian or fire her. Some Republicans do support that move. He's choosing not to do so. He says he doesn't want to set that precedent. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it will hold?
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think, in Washington, D.C., where we're seeing a lot of precedents go by the wayside with the Trump administration, this is one that seems to have some bipartisan consensus to stay in place. But it's interesting that you noted that Senator Tillis is a no on this bill. Being from North Carolina, I think it shows you how politically toxic this bill is. The American people need to know two things about this bill, which is, first, what it is designed to do, and second, how it is paid for. What it's designed to do is give tax cuts for the very wealthy and big business. And how it pays for those tax cuts is by cutting Medicaid, cutting Obamacare, and cutting SNAP benefits for low-income Americans. And even with all that, it still can't pay for itself. It has to add $3 trillion to the deficit. So I think it's a striking note that Senator Tillis is against it. And it shows you that this bill is really a reverse Robin Hood. It gives to the very wealthy by robbing the poor.
All right, Brendan, I'll give you a chance to respond and then try to sneak in another question here as well.
Well, the thing I'll say about the Medicaid reforms, as some of the folks on the House side pointed out, a lot of the folks that would be off the rolls in this are people who already get subsidized coverage. They're already getting benefits from other places. I think over 1 million illegal immigrants are also part of that number. And so I think Republicans are pushing back on that particular criticism. But look, one thing I'll say about the tax relief is that if you want to get the economy booming again in this country, we have to do two things: spending reform, which we haven't been very good at. And that's been a bipartisan problem for a long time, but also tax cuts. It's pretty clear that tax cuts lead to growth for the economy, lead to lower unemployment rates and for economic growth. And so I think that that's something that's going to be good for the country. I would submit that we need to do a lot better job in a bipartisan fashion on the spending side. So I share those concerns of Senator Paul and Tillis and others.
Do you think, Brendan, that there will be concessions made that will allow those holdouts to come to the table to vote for this bill? We know that this is a major priority for the president and the administration, a big piece of the financial puzzle.
Yeah, look, I do think they're going to have to make some concessions to some of these senators. I know that Senator Hawley, who said he's for the bill moving forward, has been one of those folks, for example, who's worried about this AI moratorium provision. That's a good example to focus on, where, you have senators who are saying this is a huge deal, this transformational technology, and we're just going to basically tell states they can't do anything about it in the next decade. I think that that's an example of where hopefully the president and the Senate will make some concessions there so they can get the votes that they need. Senator Paul is one of those people that's been outspoken with a concern about that provision in addition to the spending side. So, look, this is the way it works. You have to sort of cut these deals and figure out a way to get the votes that you need. And I think that's an example of something that they're going to have to probably give on in order to get the votes.
All right, Mally Smith, Brendan Steinhauser, we have to leave it there. I really appreciate your time. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.